Everyone said the M4 Mac Minis were tremendous value for money when they came out last year. Well, I've been using my M4 Pro Mac Mini for just under a year now, and I think I can finally set the record straight on whether that's true or not and help you buy the right M4 Mac Mini. I'm David, and this is D Talking Tech. Having used my M4 Pro Mac Mini now for the past 10 months, the rose-tinted glasses are off and that new toy syndrome is a thing in the rearview mirror. And I can tell you what it's honestly like to sit here and use this thing day after day. Now, like some of my recent videos, which I know you've enjoyed, this isn't going to be full of B-roll. You know what the M4 Mac Mini looks like and what you're getting. This video is to help you make an informed decision about the Mac Mini that you should buy and hopefully save you some money. Now, when the Mac Mini was released, it was part of a Mac season, if you remember. We got the iMacs the day before, the M4 iMacs the day before. Then we got the Mac Minis, and the day after, we got the M4 MacBook Pros. But it was the Mac Mini that stole the headlines, and for good reason. It was a brand new design, it was tiny, it had a small footprint, it was powerful, it was quiet, it had M4 Apple Silicon inside, and of course, the headline was you could get yourself an M4 Mac Mini for £600. Apple were trading on this idea that it was great value for money. But is that true, or is it hype? Well, let's have a look at the differences between the M4 Mac Mini and the M4 Pro Mac Mini. One of the standout differences is memory bandwidth. On the M4 Pro Mac Mini, it's 120% faster at 273 gigs per second. You can also spec up your CPU to have a 14-core CPU and a 20-core GPU, which is the specs I've got in mind. Memory, well, that tops out at 32 gigs on the M4 Mac Mini, 64 gigs on the M4 Pro Mac Mini, and it's a similar story when it comes to storage. On storage on the M4 Mac Mini, that kicks out at 2 terabytes, but if you've got a spare £2,500 to give to Tim and the boys, you can go up to 8 terabytes of storage on the M4 Pro Mac Mini. And the Pro has slightly better external display support as well. Now, it's on the I/O. That's where stuff started to get interesting. The fronts are exactly the same. You get a pair of USB-C ports and you get the headphone jack, but it's on the back. Apple decided to take out the Thunderbolt 4 ports on the Mac Mini, and on the M4 Pro Mac Mini, give us Thunderbolt 5. And the big figures, I can still picture it, on stage that day were 120 gigs per second speeds. Now, they're not lying. Those figures are true, but that's more to do with display bandwidth than it is to do with data transfer. Data transfer is quick. It's around about twice the speed of Thunderbolt 4 at 80 gigs per second, and it is quick. You know it's quick when you're using it. Now, for a time, like a lot of reviewers, I use both Mac Minis. I use the standard and the M4 Pro Mac Mini. And I couldn't really tell them apart. Most days, I couldn't have told you which Mac I was using. Let's face it, they look identical, and they performed very, very similarly. Apple has this way of sucking us in. It's clever marketing. That's what they're there to do. But all they do is open the door, and they then let our vanity and desire lead us down that road of spending more money. It's not their fault, it's ours. And I'm as guilty as the next person. I'm 100% as guilty as the next person. I think of myself as a pro. Why? Because I've got a YouTube channel that I make content every week about Apple gear. I write about Apple gear. I edit photos in Lightroom every day. I edit videos all the time in Final Cut Pro. The only way I can make a living is by using a Mac. So surely that makes me a pro. Surely I need a pro device. But I would argue that that's kind of old currency. These new Apple Silicon Macs are so powerful that I think we need to reset how we think about them. It turns out that I'm not as pro as I thought I was. The only things I do on my Macs that push them in the slightest is when I'm editing pictures in Lightroom or videos in Final Cut Pro. And I spent £2,500 on this Mac Mini. This M4 Pro Mac Mini cost me £2,500. No display, no keyboard, no mouse, £2,500 for a box. And I'm beginning to think that possibly I kept the wrong Mac Mini. I ticked too many boxes, and that was my mistake. As I said, apart from Lightroom and Final Cut, I think I could work quite happily on any of the Macs I've got around me here. I've got an M4 iMac, which if I'd spec slightly better, would do a great job for me. I've got a well-spec'd M3 MacBook Air that I could use. Hell, even my M4 iPad Pro, now that you've got iPadOS 26 in it, I could use that for most of my day-to-day work quite happily. But the star isn't really the Mac Mini, although that was getting all the headlines, it's Apple Silicon. We need to think back to 4 years ago, 5 years ago when Apple Silicon came out. That was the game changer. That was the once-in-a-generation thing that changed everything. Every PC manufacturer has been chasing Apple down ever since, and only now are starting to catch up. Apple kept that one under the hood. They kept that quiet, and then they suddenly shocked us with the power and performance that we're getting, and they still tell us that Apple don't innovate anymore, which is kind of ironic. You can go and buy a well-spec'd high-end M4 Mac if you want to, and you will get a quick Mac. If you've got the money and you really want it, go fill your boots. It will be quick. All I'm saying is, in my real world kind of workflow that I have going on here, the differences I saw in speed were minutes, not lots of minutes, 1, maybe 2 minutes, not 5 or 10 minutes. It's up to you to decide whether that extra money you're spending is really worth it to you or not. I'm beginning to think that I overspent on mine. I really am. Now, maybe you're a coder, maybe you're a 3D artist, maybe you're a gamer. Then possibly you'll be seeing the benefits out of getting one of these higher end Macs. But for me and the kind of work I do, honestly, I think I could get a lot done for not spending that much. The thing is that all apps are optimized so well for Mac now, and Mac OS is really well sorted. I can't wait to start using the new Mac OS on my main Mac. I've got it on the iMac. I haven't had a lot of chance to use it yet. But if iOS 26 and iPadOS 26 are anything to go by, the new Mac OS is going to be something special and take things even further into everything being so well optimized for them. Now, an example of that is the plugins that I use in Final Cut. I use MOTIONVFX plugins, as do most Final Cut users. And some effects and transitions that I used a few years ago that used to make the timeline stutter and stop and stall now are seamless. And that's all because of the processors that we've got inside of these Macs now. They are so good. And as I said, this is working on fairly basic Macs. I've edited some videos on my M3 MacBook Air. And as long as I'm not really trying to push it too hard, it works just fine. That's how far we have come. You can get so much more done now for spending not as much as we used to think we have to spend. It's us getting past that vanity hurdle. The one thing I would say with any Apple Silicon Mac that you want to use for any kind of serious work is make sure you get at least 24 gigs of memory on it. When it comes to storage, you've got Thunderbolt 4 or Thunderbolt 5 ports. Just buy yourself some external SSD. I happen to use these Acasis ones. They suit me fine. But honestly, that's the way to go. Get enough memory in there because obviously, as we know, you can't upgrade that after the fact. But when it comes to storage, save yourself money and use those ports they've given us and buy yourself an external SSD. Certainly on a desktop, you don't know that it's there. Now, I mentioned that my M4 Pro Mac Mini is one of the Macs that I use every day. I split my working day up between here in the studio and at home. I work at home in the mornings where I'm working on a 2021 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro with 32 gigs of memory and 4 terabytes of SSD storage on it. And then in the afternoons, I come here and work on my M4 Pro Mac Mini. And that puts me in a position where I'm judging a machine, an M1 Max machine from 4 years ago to this year's machine. Am I noticing a difference? I'm really not, honestly. And I'm going to come back to a little bargain there as well in just a moment. And as for those Thunderbolt 5 ports that we fell apart wanting to use last year, I barely use them. In my case, I have a 4 terabyte Thunderbolt 5 SSD in the back of my M4 Pro Mac Mini, which stays here all the time. I archive my video work on there so that I can access it quickly when I'm editing videos. But other than that, I don't use the other 2 Thunderbolt 5 ports on the back of my M4 Pro Mac Mini, which just goes to show you how things can get oversold and you don't even really need them. There's no point using a Thunderbolt 5 enclosure between here and home because, of course, my M1 Max MacBook Pro has only got Thunderbolt 4 in it as well. Now, the Mac Mini can still be good value for money. Just don't go ticking too many boxes. Just be honest about what that machine is meant to be and take it on face value. If I was going to buy a Mac Mini today, I'd go for the base Mac Mini with 32 gigs of memory and 1 terabyte of storage, and that would run me £1,400. Now, in my case, when I bought my M4 Pro Mac Mini, I also got the 10 gig Ethernet port as well. I have got my NAS connected to it, which I use all of the time, but I think looking back now, I wouldn't bother. 60-70% of the time, I'm using my NAS remotely anyway, which is part of the beauty of it, that I can access it remotely. And when I'm here in the studio and I've got large files, for instance, on this SD card, I'll put it straight into the NAS anyway and transfer it directly onto it. So I think I could save myself a further £100 by not going for that 10 gig Ethernet port as well. And that is the knack, because I keep coming back to telling you about getting a bargain when it comes to an M4 Mac Mini is to be honest about what you're going to use it for and don't go ticking those option boxes. That's where we all make the mistake. Spec up a Mac Mini, by all means. But the moment you start looking at an M4 Pro Mac Mini, step back and begin thinking about the M4 Max Mac Studio. That's the smart move. Now, in my defense, the M4 Max Mac Studio wasn't out when I bought my Mac Minis. But when you look what you're getting now, for £2,099, you get 36 gigs of memory as standard and 512 gigs of storage as well. You also get an SD card reader. You get 4 Thunderbolt 5 ports rather than 3. You get a couple of USB-A ports. And you even get that 10 gig Ethernet port that I was telling you about as standard as well. The memory bandwidth is a huge bump up, 200% quicker than on the M4 Pro Mac Mini. And you get the 14-core CPU and a 32-core GPU. It really is a no-brainer. If you look at what you're getting for that extra £700 between that M4 Mac Mini that I was speaking about a moment ago and the M4 Mac Studio, it is a no-brainer. The moment you start to look and think you need an M4 Pro Mac Mini, start thinking of Mac Studios. And that's one of the things, that's one of the patterns I can begin to see establishing here, is that we can look at base level Macs. When you get to that tipping point, begin looking at the base level Mac of the next Mac up. And there's a pattern that's beginning to develop there, and it's worth bearing in mind because you can get yourself a bargain. That M4 Mac Studio, that base config M4 Mac Studio looks tremendous value to me, and it's the one that I'd probably go for now in place of the Mac Mini I've got sitting on my desk here. Yes, in fact, it's £500 cheaper than the Mac Mini I've got sitting on my desk here, so it definitely makes sense. Now, I said there was a hidden hero as well a moment ago, and that's my M1 Max MacBook Pro. Now, I couldn't find one of exactly the same spec when I looked on eBay a moment ago, but some that were similar were going for around about £1,700. And that represents great value for money. I've already said I can't tell the difference when I'm working at home in the mornings on that machine to these brand new Macs that I've got sitting around and in every corner of this studio here. That represents fantastic value for money. £1,700 for a fantastic display, keyboard, trackpad, an all-in-one Mac, and an SD card reader. Honestly, if you can find one with good provenance and one that's been looked after as well as mine, that is the bargain. The M4 Pro Mac Mini remains one of the best Macs that I've ever bought. I couldn't be happy with it. I really couldn't. It's quiet, it's powerful, it's efficient. All the things that I said at the beginning, they are true. I can't think of a time that it's crashed. I've had precious few spinning beach balls on it. It is a fantastic Mac, but I should have spent less. I would be able to do most of the work that I do on my M4 Pro Mac Mini for a fraction of the cost. And promise me, the moment you start thinking about an M4 Pro Mac Mini, start looking at that M4 Mac Studio. Now, if you've got this far through the video, I'm hoping you've enjoyed it. I'm hoping you're enjoying our casual discussions we have each week about everything Apple. And if you have, it would help me an awful lot. If you subscribe to the channel, it really does help it grow and it helps get the video out in front of more people. I won't say any more and bore you anymore with that. There are other ways you can get involved with the channel. We've got our own Discord server now where you can chat with like-minded Apple freaks during the week. Details for that are in the description. And also I send out a totally free members newsletter every single Sunday afternoon where I talk about things that I can't talk about on the main channel here. Again, there are details of how to do that in the description. And also, you might see behind me, this little teaser, there's a print behind me on the wall. Later in the year, I'm going to tell you how you can buy some limited edition signed prints of some of my photos that I had printed over the weekend, and I could not be happier with them. There's going to be more details on that later on. Now, I mentioned a few moments ago about the NAS that I've been using. There's a video on screen now where I tell you all about how I find using a NAS every day in my workflow.